Cliff Rosenthal dedicated his career to improving access to capital for low-income and minority communities. His innovative ideas altered the contour of the credit union landscape, making it possible for people with limited income to buy a car, buy a house, or start a small business. Born in 1945, Cliff Rosenthal was raised in Newark, New Jersey. His grandparents settled there after fleeing the pogroms in Russia. His family's experience of exile and their struggle to make a place in the U.S. taught Cliff what it feels like to be an outsider. Cliff crossed the Hudson to attend college, a major move for a first-generation kid from New Jersey. At Columbia College, he planned a future as an historik, a Russian historian. In the turmoil over the war in Vietnam, Cliff reconsidered his future. He turned away from academia and began to study the major crises of the time, including world hunger. As he learned about the conspiracy of large corporations to control the food supply and elevate prices, Cliff explored cooperative organization as a way to make food more affordable. Inspired by the activism of his peers and working for free, he organized his first food co-op at 788 Riverside Drive. Building food co-ops became Cliff's driving passion. Eventually, he managed to earn a salary as a food co-op organizer for Native Americans in Connecticut. In the late 1970s, Cliff took a job with the National Association of Farm Worker Organizations in Washington, D.C. When his boss asked him to organize a credit union to serve NAFO members, Cliff was willing. He didn't know anything about credit unions, but he recognized the potential good of these nonprofit money cooperatives. Cliff worked in D.C., but his heart stayed in Brooklyn. Elaine Archer was an activist, teacher, and writer, and Cliff wanted to spend his life with her. Elaine had founded a small community of families in Brooklyn, and Cliff was happy to join. Ready to share responsibility for children and housework, he married Elaine in 1980. Back in New York, Cliff discovered that the National Federation of Community Development Credit Unions was located in downtown Brooklyn. He volunteered his expertise. 6 months later, he was hired. But the paid job didn't last long. Federal funding for the Federation evaporated a few months later. Cliff became a volunteer again, running what was left of the Federation from his dining room table. Cliff secured a fellowship to hire Annie Vamper, a credit union expert whose passion for the work matched his. Together, Cliff and Annie rebuilt the Federation into a catalyst for change in the credit union movement. Annie's partnership with Cliff lasted until her death in 1990. Cliff organized a two-pronged strategy to raise urgently needed capital, new channels for private investment, and expanded public funding. While Annie worked to develop new CDCUs, Cliff built relationships in the community. In 1982, the Federation received its first major private investment, $30,000 from the Adrian Dominican Sisters. Cliff had the brilliant idea of creating a federal fund to support community development and cooperative finance. He outlined his plan in a 1988 concept paper. 6 years later, President Bill Clinton signed a bill establishing the Community Development Financial Institutions Fund. Now, more than 500 credit unions serving 20 million members are CDFI certified. Thanks to Cliff's public and private initiatives, the Federation, now known as Inclusiv, was able to invest more than $100 million in local credit unions. Inclusiv celebrated its 50th anniversary in 2024. In 2012, Cliff retired from the Federation. He returned to Washington to establish the Office of Financial Empowerment at the newly formed Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Cliff is also an author. He writes for industry publications, including American Banker. He published a book that traces the roots of community development finance over 2 centuries. He keeps a blog with monographs, articles, and opinion pieces. This year, Cliff co-authored a new book that is part memoir and part narrative of the unjust federal termination of a black fraternity's credit union in 2010. Cliff's wife Elaine died earlier this year after a short illness. Her passing was a terrible loss to Cliff and to the family they formed in the house on 6th Street. He is comforted by the time spent with his 5-year-old granddaughter Anna Caroline. He continues to live in the house he and Elaine shared for 43 years. Although he has been honored many times for his visionary leadership, Cliff is most proud of his 2019 induction into the African American Credit Union Hall of Fame, in acknowledgement of the courage and conviction that distinguish him as a visionary cooperative leader. We honor Cliff Rosenthal tonight with induction into the Cooperative Hall of Fame.